Jacob "Buck" Lowe, the fan favorite from Mountain Monsters, has just broken his silence, revealing disturbing truths about what really happened behind the cameras. What he's claiming isn't just shocking, it's terrifying. Hidden footage, secret investigations, and a government warning that nearly shut down production for good. Was Mountain Monsters really a show about chasing folklore? Or were they documenting something no one was ever supposed to find? Before we uncover the truth, hit subscribe, because what you're about to hear has been buried for years, and tonight it finally comes to light. Before the cameras, before the fame, Jacob "Buck" Lowe was just another kid from West Virginia who grew up surrounded by stories of things that shouldn't exist. Born and raised in the Appalachian foothills, Lowe was fascinated by local folklore. Not the campfire kind, but the whispered ones. Tales of shadow figures in the hollers, red eyes blinking from tree lines, and miners who vanished deep underground. When Mountain Monsters premiered in 2013, audiences met Buck as the comic relief, the rookie who was eager but naive, always ready to run headfirst into the dark with a flashlight and faith in his team. But as the seasons went on, something changed. The laughter faded, the jokes slowed, and Buck became more guarded, more serious. Off-camera, castmates said Buck had developed an obsession with cross-referencing the show's locations with historical records and old missing person reports. He'd spend hours in county libraries, talking to locals who refused to go near certain ridgelines. He wasn't looking for monsters, one former producer claimed. He was looking for patterns. Fans who met him at conventions described him as polite but distracted, like his mind was elsewhere, still out in those woods. The transformation wasn't lost on his fellow cast members either. Wild Bill once joked during a live stream, "Buck ain't sleeping good. Man's dreaming about the woods, talking back." What few knew was that Buck had started keeping a private journal filled with sketches and cryptic notes that didn't make sense to anyone else. When pressed about it, he'd smile and say, "Just in case we find something they don't want us to." That line would prove prophetic, because behind the curtain of the show's entertainment veneer, Buck was uncovering details about the Appalachian region that didn't fit neatly into folklore, details that made even the producers nervous. And it all began with a single investigation the network would later erase from its archives. The story that changed everything began during the filming of the 2015 episode known internally as The Creature of Boone County. It was supposed to be another thrilling hunt. Thermal cameras, motion sensors, and wild theories about a cryptid seen near an old railway tunnel. But what the crew captured that night, according to Buck, was something that made even the most skeptical members of the Mountain Monsters team fall silent. They were tracking heat signatures moving just beyond the tree line when Buck spotted a humanoid figure standing upright at the edge of the clearing. It wasn't running, it wasn't hiding, it was just watching them. The crew's thermal scopes caught it clearly, nearly 7 feet tall, moving with a precision that didn't match any known animal. Then, just as quickly, every camera on site began to fail. Batteries drained, audio spiked into static. By the time they checked their footage later that night, everything from that moment forward had been corrupted. Producers told the team it was a technical glitch, but Buck didn't believe it. A few days later, an editor working post-production allegedly told him something that shook him, that a second copy of the raw files existed, one the network had quietly locked in an encrypted server marked "Do Not Distribute." Within weeks, the entire episode's storyline was rewritten. The strange sighting was replaced with a harmless, false alarm narrative. Fans noticed inconsistencies, mismatched weather, missing dialogue, an abrupt ending that felt edited to hide something. Months later, during a small podcast interview, Buck broke his silence and admitted, "What we filmed that night wasn't a monster story. It was something else, something walking like us, but it wasn't us." That confession vanished from the internet within 24 hours. But by then, a handful of listeners had already clipped the audio. What Buck said next would ignite one of the most chilling rumors in Appalachian folklore history: that the Mountain Monsters crew had captured real evidence the government didn't want aired. Just months after the mysterious Boone County footage vanished, Buck's life took a darker turn. It began one night in late 2017 when he received a phone call from an unlisted number. The voice on the other end was calm, deliberate, and unlike anyone he knew. "Mr. Lowe," it said, "you and your team need to stop filming in the Tigard Valley region. There are areas marked restricted for a reason." Buck assumed it was a prank. But when the caller mentioned the exact coordinates of their next shoot, a location not yet released to the network, his stomach dropped. The voice paused, then added, "You've already seen something you shouldn't have. Don't make us come down there again." And then the line went dead. Buck immediately tried to trace the call, but his phone log showed no record of it. The number didn't exist. When he called his carrier, the technician claimed there was a temporary system error on his account. Days later, those records were gone entirely. Buck told his producer, who brushed it off as a fan or hoax, but the timing was too precise. He turned to the one man who would take him seriously, John "Trapper" Tice, the team's legendary leader. When Buck explained what happened, Trapper went quiet. Then, after a long pause, he said, "Son, we've been watched for years. Every time we get close, the ground starts shaking. They don't want folks knowing what's under it." That week, Buck started noticing small, unsettling details. A dark SUV parked down the road from his house, a drone hovering above the team's base camp, strange clicks on his phone line during interviews. Crew members laughed it off, but Buck was convinced someone was following them. On the next shoot, he confronted the issue directly during a filmed segment, saying on camera, "If they're listening, maybe they'll finally tell us why." But that entire scene never aired. Editors later said it didn't fit the tone. From that moment on, Buck realized Mountain Monsters wasn't just documenting folklore. It was stepping on the toes of something far bigger, something that didn't want to be found. In 2018, Buck's quiet suspicion turned into full-blown paranoia, or at least that's what his colleagues thought. He had become fixated on uncovering what really happened to the missing Boone County footage. After months of asking questions, he finally got a tip from a former production assistant who had worked in the editing room during that season. She told him that before the files were deleted, someone from outside the Destination America network had accessed the servers remotely. They weren't producers, she whispered. They were federal. According to her, an entire batch of raw footage was copied and flagged under a government code label, Non-Terrestrial Wildlife, Class 7. That phrase didn't match any U.S. fish and wildlife category, but it appeared in internal file logs. When Buck heard that, he started digging deeper, calling contacts in IT, chasing rumors, even contacting online whistleblower groups. What he uncovered next made even the skeptics pause. He found a screenshot from a data leak showing Mountain Monsters listed among other media suppression cases involving paranormal investigations and off-record government monitoring. The metadata tied back to a private defense contractor known for handling unusual biological recoveries. Buck couldn't believe what he was seeing. Their show, the same one known for laughter and Appalachian folklore, was apparently being treated like a national security risk. That night, Buck called Wild Bill and Jeff and showed them the screenshot. Bill's jaw dropped. "You're saying we're on some kind of government list for catching Bigfoot?" Buck shook his head. "No," he said, "not Bigfoot, something worse." Within days, the screenshot disappeared from the forums, scrubbed clean. The whistleblower who'd shared it deleted all her accounts. And then, strangely, a man claiming to represent Homeland Resource Oversight contacted the network, and every mention of the Boone County footage was permanently removed from their digital archives. That's when Buck realized the truth wasn't just being buried, it was being erased. By early 2019, the tension surrounding Mountain Monsters had reached its peak. Fans noticed long gaps between episodes, cryptic network statements, and rumors of production halts due to safety issues. Behind the scenes, Buck said the team wasn't just scared, they were being silenced. But the one person who refused to stay quiet was Trapper Tice. Though his health was failing, the old hunter remained sharp as ever. "They think they can bury this," he told Buck one night during a late call, "but the Earth don't keep secrets forever." According to Buck, Trapper had been doing his own research, compiling decades' worth of encounter reports that were never shown on television. Some of those came from military bases and old miners who claimed they'd seen tall figures with reflective eyes walking along restricted ridgelines after dark. Trappers' theory? That the creatures they'd been hunting weren't cryptids at all. They were sentries, biological watchers tied to something older and more organized than anyone imagined. A few weeks before his death, Trapper gave Buck a USB drive sealed in duct tape. "If something happens to me," he said, "make sure this doesn't end up in their hands." But after Trapper passed away, the drive vanished from Buck's truck. He reported it stolen, but there were no signs of a break-in. The local sheriff told him it was probably a coincidence. Maybe he dropped it. Buck didn't believe that for a second. In a podcast interview years later, Buck described the final message Trapper sent him just days before he died. The text read, "They're moving something out of the tunnels. If we disappear, tell them it's not a legend." The night that message was sent, strange radio interference was recorded across several counties in West Virginia. And in the Mountain Monsters archives, there's still an entire week of footage that was never released, marked confidential, sealed, and filed under Trapper's name. Whatever was on that drive, Buck believes it was the key to everything, the proof that turned their monster hunts into a real-life cover-up. After Trapper's death, something shifted, not just in the Mountain Monsters team, but in how the show was being handled. Buck described it best in a live stream months later. "It stopped feeling like entertainment and started feeling like surveillance." He wasn't exaggerating. Production meetings that used to take place in open offices were suddenly invite-only. Crew members had to sign new non-disclosure agreements that forbade them from discussing unreleased materials or field anomalies. And every episode outlined now had to be cleared by a network-appointed compliance officer. None of this had happened before. The breaking point came during a shoot in Summers County. The crew captured something on a thermal drone, a figure far larger than a man, moving through the trees with unnatural speed. The moment Buck requested a copy of the raw file, he was told it had been corrupted. When he insisted on seeing the backup footage, he was informed that all secondary storage had been reformatted by mistake. Within 48 hours, the team received a message from the network's parent company stating that content pertaining to non-verifiable biological entities was no longer permitted to air. This wasn't just censorship, it was an erasure of their work. Buck, furious, went to social media to vent his frustration, posting cryptic messages about forces behind the curtain. Within days, those posts disappeared. His account was briefly suspended for abnormal activity, and he later discovered his phone had been remotely wiped. Meanwhile, fans began noticing the edits. Conversations were cut mid-sentence. Equipment malfunctions that Buck swore were not natural were replaced with staged bloopers, and in one strange case, an entire episode was uploaded with the wrong audio, the team's dialogue replaced by a looping background track. When questioned, the network's PR team said it was a post-production error, but Buck didn't buy it. He believed the truth was being buried again, and this time it wasn't some faceless editor behind the curtain. He started to suspect the involvement of something much deeper, a partnership between private media and government handlers. Because if Mountain Monsters was ever allowed to show what they'd actually seen in those woods, he believed the world's understanding of reality would never be the same. By late 2020, Buck Jacob Lowe was no longer the same man who first appeared on Mountain Monsters as the big-hearted rookie with an infectious laugh. He was paranoid, withdrawn, and convinced that someone, or something, was keeping tabs on him. Crew members later claimed that Buck had started keeping detailed journals filled with coded notes and strange sketches of symbols he said were etched into trees during night shoots. "It's a warning," he told one cameraman. "They mark the places we're not supposed to go." In December of that year, Buck vanished for 4 days. According to his family, he'd told them he was going on a solo scouting trip in an undisclosed area of the Appalachian foothills. When he returned, he was shaken and refused to talk about what happened. But those close to him said he was different. He started locking his doors in broad daylight, stopped taking calls from the network, and deleted his online presence almost entirely. Then, just as fans began speculating about his absence, a strange video surfaced on a conspiracy forum. It appeared to show Buck in a wooded area, his camera shaking as he whispered, "They weren't supposed to be here. It's not just one creature. There's a gate." The clip ended abruptly, cutting to static. Within 12 hours, the video was removed. The forum moderator later stated that external takedown requests had been filed by a government media agency. When Buck resurfaced on Mountain Monsters months later, he looked exhausted but strangely composed. His demeanor had changed. Calmer, more cautious, almost rehearsed. He avoided direct questions about the missing footage and made vague comments about respecting the boundaries. Off camera, though, he told a podcast host that some truths aren't meant for television. Behind the scenes, crew members claimed he'd received a non-negotiable ultimatum from outside advisors, warning him to stay quiet if he valued his safety and the show's future. Fans noticed it too. Buck's eyes told a different story. Whatever he saw out there during those missing 4 days, it was enough to silence him, and enough to convince him that Mountain Monsters was no longer hunting legends. It had stumbled onto something the world wasn't ready to face. In early 2021, whispers began circulating among Mountain Monsters fans and insiders alike. Rumors of a lost tape, one that Buck had recorded during his mysterious 4-day disappearance. The footage allegedly surfaced briefly on a dark web server under the cryptic title Black Site Footage 001. According to those who claimed to have seen it before it was taken down, the video showed Buck walking through a fog-covered ravine at night, holding a flashlight and muttering into a handheld recorder. "It's watching from the ridge," he said breathlessly. "Not one of ours. Not an animal. They built it." Midway through the clip, a high-pitched frequency distorts the audio, and a figure appears in the distance. Humanoid, but not human. Its outline shimmered, like heat mirage meeting flesh. Then, without warning, the camera dropped, and the screen went black. At the end, a single frame flickered before the feed cut out. An insignia, a triangle inside a circle, surrounded by the Latin words Specula Silentium. Translated, it means the Watchers of Silence. That was enough to send conspiracy forums into overdrive. Some users claimed that the emblem belonged to a secret intelligence branch operating beneath the U.S. Department of Energy, specializing in anomalous biological containment. Others believed it was tied to a private defense contractor with deep ties to government-funded research in the Appalachians. Whatever it was, the tape was gone within hours, scrubbed from every host site by unknown IPs traced to Virginia. Buck never confirmed or denied the video's authenticity, but those who spoke to him after said he looked terrified. In a leaked email exchange between him and a producer, Buck allegedly wrote, "They made contact first. The truth isn't about monsters, it's about us." Not long after, Buck quietly resigned from Mountain Monsters. The official statement said he was taking time for personal reflection, but insiders say he was forced out after warning the network that airing certain episodes could compromise national stability. Weeks later, the show's archives were abruptly moved off-site, sealed under contractual audit. The drive containing Buck's private research logs was destroyed in what the network called a technical failure. But despite every attempt to erase him, the rumor of that tape, the one showing what Buck found in the fog, refuses to die. Because somewhere in those mountains, the Watchers are still waiting. And Buck Jacob Lowe may have been the only man to ever catch one looking back. By 2023, Buck Jacob Lowe had become a ghost of his former self, a man haunted not by what he didn't find in the woods, but by what he did. When he finally resurfaced for a podcast interview, his voice trembled as he spoke about things not meant for TV. He didn't name names, but his words were heavy. "They told us we were chasing legends, but legends don't make satellites move. Legends don't make black SUVs show up after filming." The host nervously laughed it off, but Buck wasn't joking. Soon after that interview aired, strange things began happening to those involved. The video was removed from YouTube within 48 hours for content violations, and the host's studio email account was locked by an unknown administrator illustrator. Buck's name disappeared from the Mountain Monsters website entirely, his biography scrubbed as if he had never been there. Even the promotional posters featuring him were replaced with edited versions showing only the remaining team members. Insiders claim Buck went off the grid completely. No social media, no public appearances, not even contact with his old castmates. But behind closed doors, rumors spread that he had been working on something, a tell-all documentary that would expose what Mountain Monsters really uncovered before the network buried it. Allegedly titled The Hidden Ones, it was said to include fragments of the band footage, interviews with whistleblowers, and proof that government-funded contractors had been monitoring cryptid sites across Appalachia since the early 2000s. Then, in the spring of 2024, the project vanished. Funding pulled, files erased, the team disbanded. A single anonymous post appeared on Reddit the same week. Reading only, Buck was right. They weren't hunting monsters. They were hunting witnesses. No one has heard from him since. But one thing's certain, the truth Buck tried to tell didn't just die with the show. It's out there, buried in encrypted servers, in unmarked archives, and maybe even in the same woods where this story began. And if Buck Jacob Lowe was silenced for good, then the question that still chills those who watched him the most remains unanswered. What if the monsters were never the danger, and the real threat was the people trying to hide them? For over a decade, Mountain Monsters followed the AIMS team as they hunted creatures most people only whispered about. The Wolfman, the Grassman, the Mothman, but few knew that behind the laughter and legends, something darker was unfolding. Recently, longtime investigator Jeff Headley broke his silence. What he described wasn't just another hunt gone wrong. It was an encounter so disturbing, it changed the team forever. The night they stopped filming wasn't planned, it was survival. And after hearing Jeff's account, you'll understand why Mountain Monsters never returned the same. Make sure you're subscribed. What you're about to hear is chilling. For years, Jeff Headley had been the AIMS team's anchor, the calm voice behind the chaos. While Trapper led the hunts and Buck charged headfirst into danger, Jeff stayed behind the monitors, logging coordinates, mapping sightings, and decoding patterns most viewers never noted. But in the months before Mountain Monsters quietly ended, Jeff began seeing something that made his stomach twist. The reports didn't make sense anymore. Creature sightings were multiplying, often on the same night, in towns separated by miles of solid mountain. Witnesses described the same thing: glowing eyes, rotten stench, heavy breathing, and footprints that vanished mid-trail. It wasn't the number of encounters that bothered Jeff, it was that they were overlapping, like one thing moving in several places at once. When Destination America pushed the AIMS crew to return to an old hunting ground, a hollow deep in the Monongahela National Forest, Jeff protested. That stretch of land had a reputation even locals wouldn't joke about. Trapper once called it the place the woods breathe, a spot where compasses spun, batteries died, and voices echoed from nowhere. They had filmed there years before, but after one night of unexplainable interference, it was banned from the production list. This time, though, producers wanted bigger scares, and they knew that Hollow carried a legend worth ratings. So, they went back. The crew arrived just before dusk, the smell of wet pine thick in the air. Jeff, standing near the base monitors, couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. And not just by the crew or locals. The woods were wrong, he said later. Too quiet. Even the wind didn't sound right. He logged their coordinates and marked the time, 7:43 p.m. It would be the last clear entry he ever made. By nightfall, the laughter that usually filled camp had stopped. Even Buck, who could make light of anything, sat quietly by the fire. Something about those woods felt heavier than before, like the mountain itself was listening. Jeff glanced at his monitors one last time before turning in. Everything read normal, except for one line of text that appeared across his GPS screen just before midnight. It's already here. The next morning, Jeff tried to brush off what he saw on the GPS. A glitch, he told himself. Static, maybe a prank from one of the crew. But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. The data had come through the encrypted channel, the same one used for base communication. Someone, or something, had accessed their feed. He didn't tell the others. Not yet. That day, they met with a local trapper named Harris. a quiet man in his 60s who refused to go near the ridge after dark. He claimed the creature people were seeing wasn't new. It had been around for generations. "My granddad called it the wood devil," he told Jeff. "Said it don't hunt for food. It hunts to remind you it's still here." Harris's voice cracked when he added, "You don't find it. It finds you." Back at camp, Jeff pulled up his historical logs. The stories lined up eerily well. Every decade, another spike of sightings, always around the same hollow. Even the weather patterns matched: thick fog, sudden magnetic shifts, and reports of livestock torn apart without blood loss. Jeff's unease deepened. He'd been the skeptic of the group for years, the one who balanced trappers' instincts with logic and science. But that night, as he watched the wind move unnaturally through the trees, even he began to question what was real. Around 11 p.m., the sensors started tripping, one after another, forming a perfect circle around camp. It wasn't random movement, it was deliberate. Russell called out, "Could be deer," but Jeff shook his head. Deer don't move in a ring. Then came the smell, thick, metallic, and sour, like rust and rain mixed with decay. Buck covered his nose and said, "Something died out here." But Jeff recognized it from an earlier hunt years ago, that same sulfur stench before their equipment had fried. The perimeter lights flickered, the woods went silent, and through the static of the night vision feed, Jeff caught a glimpse of something between two trees, tall, broad, and motionless. He tried to focus the camera, but the image distorted into static. And then, through the headset, a low voice, not human, not digital, whispered back the same words he saw the night before. "It's already here." By the third day, the AIMS crew had settled into their pattern, set traps, scan the perimeter, monitor the feed, but nothing about this hunt felt normal. Jeff was running diagnostics on the sensors when his laptop suddenly reset. Every file he'd logged since arriving in the hollow was gone, not deleted, erased. Even the metadata showed no trace of existence. When he tried to reconnect to the network, the GPS refused to lock onto their coordinates. The screen flashed a single message: "No fix found." He called to Buck and Russell, asking if their equipment had glitched, but they hadn't noticed anything wrong. It was only Jeff's station. "It's like we're off the map," he said, half joking. But when he looked at the compass, his stomach dropped. The needle spun endlessly, refusing to settle on north. At 8:42 p.m., the motion sensors picked up multiple heat signatures about 200 yards out. Jeff switched to thermal imaging, expecting deer or bear. Instead, the shapes stood upright, tall, symmetrical, and moving in synchronization like a coordinated group. He counted 3, then 4, then 5 figures weaving between trees. Their body temperatures were too consistent for animal. "That's not random movement," Jeff said. "That's formation." Russell and Huckleberry moved toward the ridge with flashlights, while Jeff monitored from camp. Through his headset, the static grew thicker, intercut with faint breathing sound. "Say again?" he asked, but the line was gone. Then the camera feed flickered, just long enough for him to see one of the shapes break formation and rush toward the ridge. Seconds later, a flare lit the sky, turning the forest crimson. The figures vanished instantly, but a roar echoed across the valley, so deep it vibrated the monitors. Buck's voice came through, shouting, "It's circling us! Move!" The radio crackled, then died again. Jeff grabbed his backup transmitter and tried to triangulate their location, but the system glitched and froze. On the screen, the data scrambled into letters like something was typing back. It spelled a single phrase before shutting off completely: "Don't follow." Jeff stared at the words, frozen. For the first time in years of investigating, he wasn't thinking about evidence or proof. He was thinking about escape. Night fell like a curtain, fast and suffocating. The campfire that once offered comfort now seemed too bright, too loud, like it was daring whatever was out there to come closer. Jeff sat hunched over his monitors, trying to restore the thermal feed, but every camera blinked in and out of static. He could still hear the low hum of the power units, but the signal was being jammed. Something nearby was emitting interference strong enough to shut down their entire system. Then, out of nowhere, one of the cameras came back online. The feed was shaky, snowing with distortion, but something moved across the frame, a hulking silhouette just at the edge of the light. Its height was impossible to miss. Easily 8 feet, its shoulders massive, its head sloped forward. Jeff tried to zoom in, but the system froze. When the picture cleared again, the creature was gone. "Something's in the trees," Buck whispered over the comms. "It's watching us." Jeff looked up from the screen and scanned the ridge with his flashlight. Every sound was amplified, the crack of branches, the rustle of leaves, but the forest itself seemed to hold its breath. Around 2:14 a.m., a deep vibration rolled through the ground, like a distant impact. The motion sensors all triggered at once. Lights along the perimeter began to strobe red. Huckleberry shouted from his post, "It's behind us!" Jeff swung the camera, catching only the blur of movement. A massive figure darting between trees with inhuman speed. Then came the sound that froze every man in place. A roar. Not animal, not mechanical. Something between a scream and thunder, layered with frequencies Jeff's equipment couldn't even register. The air itself seemed to distort. "Shut the lights!" he yelled. Everything went dark. For a long moment, the only sound was the pounding of their own hearts. Jeff felt a heavy presence just beyond the tree line. He didn't see it, but he knew it was there, staring straight at them. The equipment crackled, lights blinked back on, and one camera feed briefly flashed to life. In that instant, Jeff saw it. Close, clear, and deliberate. A pair of glowing amber eyes staring directly into the lens. Then, every screen went black. The silence after those eyes vanished was worse than the noise that came before. No one moved for several seconds, afraid even to breathe. Then Buck whispered, "It's in the camp," and that was all it took. Flashlights flicked on, weapons drawn, and the team scrambled to regroup. Jeff slammed his laptop shut and grabbed his gear. The monitors were fried. The entire rig reeked of ozone, the metallic smell of burnt circuitry. Whatever had interfered wasn't just energy, it was targeted. "Back to the trucks," Russell barked. Now, they moved fast, lights bouncing through the trees. The woods that had once felt familiar now looked alien, twisted shadows. Every trunk a potential shape waiting to move. Every few steps came the same sound behind them. Deliberate footsteps, heavy, pacing, just out of range. "It's following," Jeff said, breath ragged. "No, it's hurting." They reached the clearing where their trucks were parked, or what was left of them. The vehicles sat in silence, tires slashed, one windshield shattered clean through from the inside. The ground around them was covered in deep impression, footprints, almost human, but longer, wider, and spaced too far apart. "Whatever did this walked on 2 legs," Huckleberry said quietly. He pointed at one print, pressed deep into the mud. It was nearly twice the length of his boot. Jeff tried to radio production for help, but the static that came through wasn't normal. Beneath the white noise, there was a sound, slow, heavy breathing. He froze. "Listen," he whispered, handing the receiver to Buck. It wasn't distortion, it was listening back. Then, a deafening crack echoed through the trees, a branch the size of a small tree snapping under immense weight. The forest exploded with sound, crashing footsteps, scattering leaves, the echo of something massive moving fast. "Move!" Russell shouted. They didn't stop running until they reached the ridge. No one dared look back. When they finally collapsed near the base, Jeff turned on his headlamp. A thin layer of mist had rolled in, and through it, something faint glowed in the distance. 2 orange lights, unmoving, like eyes waiting just beyond the dark. No one spoke, not one of them, because every man there knew what they were looking at, and that it was looking right back. When daylight finally broke, the forest looked untouched, peaceful even. Birds had returned, and the heavy mist had burned away. But the men who emerged from that ridge weren't the same ones who'd gone in. Jeff's hands still trembled as he unpacked the cameras, desperate to find proof of what they'd seen. If they couldn't explain it, they needed at least to show it. But as he loaded the SD cards one by one into his laptop, a pit formed in his stomach. Half the files were corrupted. The timestamps jumped wildly, skipping entire hours. Others played only seconds before freezing on static. On one feed, the moment the creature's eyes appeared, the footage fractured into geometric shapes, like the data itself had been shredded. "This isn't damage," Jeff muttered. "It's erasure." Then he found something even even stranger. 3 of the cameras had continued recording long after the crew stopped filming. The metadata confirmed the files were created several hours after they left camp. "That's impossible," Russell said. "The power was cut." Jeff opened the first file. For nearly 3 minutes it showed nothing, just the dark outline of the abandoned campsite. Then, movement. A massive shape passed across the frame, blocking out the firelight. Its outline was humanoid, but the proportions were wrong. Arms too long, torso unnaturally broad. A hand pressed against the lens for a single frame, the fingers wide and angular, ending in sharp, pointed tips. The feed cut out instantly. Maria, one of the production assistants, covered her mouth. That looks like it touched the camera." Jeff nodded slowly. "Because it did." The second file was worse. The audio was filled with a low humming frequency that caused the speakers to distort. Beneath it, faint but clear, was breathing, slow, deep, and rhythmic. When they ran a spectral analysis on the sound back at headquarters, the pattern wasn't random. It matched the cadence of human speech, but no words could be formed. Jeff turned off the monitor and sat in silence. "We didn't just film it," he said softly. "It filmed us." Within 24 hours, every drive containing that footage was seized by the network's legal department for review. The team never saw those files again. And Mountain Monsters was never the same after that night. The network called it routine data retrieval. Jeff called it what it really was, a cover-up. Within days, Destination America halted all field operations and ordered the AIMS team to return home. No explanations, no debrief, just silence. When Jeff pressed for answers, he was told the footage was under internal review due to technical irregularity. Yet the language in the emails made his skin crawl. Containment, liability, non-disclosure. Those weren't production terms, they were security ones. Crew members started quitting. The sound technician, Carl, left without warning, saying he'd heard something while reviewing the raw audio. Something breathing through the mic feed that wasn't human. Another crewman refused to sleep indoors after the shoot. "Walls won't help," he muttered, before walking away. Jeff tried to resume work on his research logs, but every copy of his field notes was missing. Even the external backup drive from his laptop, the one he always kept in his bag, had vanished. "That's when I knew," he said later. "Someone didn't want this story told." Weeks later, Jeff and Huckleberry met with Trapper to discuss what came next. The old man listened quietly, chain-smoking as Jeff explained everything: the corrupted files, the erased drives, the whispers in the recordings. Trapper didn't seem surprised. He finally leaned forward and said, "You think you saw it, but you didn't. You felt it, and that's worse." He warned them not to go back. "There are things in those woods that predate us," Trapper said, his voice grave, "things that don't like being named." When Mountain Monsters returned for the next season, the energy was different. The team laughed less, hunted more carefully, and never once returned to that hollow. Even stranger, the episode they filmed before the encounter was removed from rotation. Fans noticed, forums buzzed. Jeff stayed quiet, bound by NDAS and a promise to Trapper to leave it alone. But late one night, as Jeff reviewed archived footage for a retrospective, his computer froze for a full minute before displaying a file he didn't recognize. Unlabeled, no timestamp. He opened it. It was a single still frame. Their campsite, empty, but in the center of the image stood a dark figure, tall, featureless, staring directly into the lens. And in the bottom corner, text flickered for only a moment before vanishing. "Told you not to follow." Years passed, and the AIMS team continued filming new episodes, but the fire that once defined their hunts had dimmed. Fans noticed that Jeff, once the steady voice of logic, seemed quieter, more withdrawn. He rarely joked anymore, rarely stayed on camera for long. What viewers didn't know was that Jeff hadn't slept properly in months. Ever since that night in the hollow, something had changed. He'd wake to faint tapping on his windows, even when he stayed in hotels. His radio equipment, locked in his home office, would turn on by itself in the early hours, broadcasting static filled with faint breathing and, occasionally, the same guttural hum they'd recorded years before. He replaced every wire, every receiver, but the noise always returned. "It's not a malfunction," he told Buck one night. "It's recognition." It knows my signal. At first, Jeff kept it to himself. The team had already been through too much, and he didn't want to sound paranoid. But when Huckleberry visited to help test new gear, the same thing happened. The monitors powered on by themselves, and every sensor in the room spiked once, twice, then flatlined. "That's the same pattern as before," Huckleberry said, his voice shaking. "Exactly the same." Jeff's health started to decline soon after. He stopped sleeping entirely some nights, claiming he could hear movement outside his house, slow, deliberate footsteps circling his porch. Neighbors reported strange howls echoing through the holler behind his property, though no animal tracks were ever found. During a rare public appearance in 2022, fans asked him why Mountain Monsters felt different after Season 7. Jeff smiled faintly, but didn't answer right away. Finally, he leaned toward the mic and said, "Because some of us stopped hunting monsters, and some of us realized the monsters started hunting us." The audience laughed nervously, assuming it was just storytelling flair. But the look on Jeff's face said otherwise. That night, he packed up his remaining field gear and logged one final note into his research file. The entry was short, just one line that nobody but him ever saw. "It followed me home." When Jeff finally decided to speak publicly, it wasn't through a network interview or convention panel. It was during a quiet live stream viewed by barely a few thousand fans. His voice was tired, his expression haunted. For years, he'd kept the truth locked away behind contracts and silence, but that night, he couldn't hold it in anymore. "The show didn't end because of ratings," he began. "It ended because of what we found." He explained how one of the backup hard drives, long thought destroyed, had resurfaced. A former production editor had reached out anonymously, claiming to still possess fragments of the footage from that night in the hollow. Jeff said he watched it alone, in total darkness. What he saw confirmed everything he'd feared. The video began normally, shaky footage of the forest, night vision beams cutting through fog. But then came the movement. A tall, humanoid figure stepped from the tree line, shoulders hunched, eyes glowing faintly amber. It paused, staring into the camera before raising its hand, the same gesture seen on the corrupted tapes. The footage ended with the lens shaking violently before fading to black. Jeff looked straight into the webcam. "It wasn't human," he said, "and it wasn't afraid of us." After the stream ended, the video disappeared within hours. No one could find the archived link, not even through cached sites. The network refused to acknowledge it, and the editor who'd contacted Jeff deleted his account. Within days, speculation flooded the internet. Theories of government intervention, lost tapes, and a final warning from the AIMS team. But Jeff's final message was simple. "We thought we were hunting something wild," he said, "but it's older than the mountains, and it's not finished with us." He closed the stream with a long pause, then whispered the words Trapper once told him. "We didn't end mountain monsters. The mountain did." And with that, the screen went black, leaving only the sound of faint static and the sense that somewhere in those endless woods, the story still isn't over. Before his death, John Trapper Tice, the fearless leader of mountain monsters, hinted at something far darker than the world ever saw on television. He claimed the show had stumbled onto a truth so disturbing, the footage was buried, and the team was told never to speak of it again. But now, years later, evidence has surfaced, suggesting Trapper may have been right all along, that something ancient, something inhuman, was watching them during every hunt. Tonight, we uncover the dark revelation Trapper left behind, and why the truth about mountain monsters was never meant to be seen. If you think you know this story, think again. Subscribe now, because what you're about to hear changes everything. Before Mountain Monsters became one of the most talked about paranormal shows in America, John Trapper Tice was already a legend in West Virginia. Born and raised among the fog-drenched hollows of the Appalachian Mountains, Trapper knew those woods better than anyone. He served his country in the U.S. Army, worked as a skilled tracker and outdoorsman, and carried with him an unshakable respect for nature and for the things most people refused to believe lived within it. To locals, Trapper wasn't a TV star. He was the man you called when something strange howled at the edge of your property and wouldn't go away. When Mountain Monsters first aired in 2013, Trapper was reluctant. He wasn't after fame. He wanted proof. He wanted the world to understand that the stories passed down through generations about the Mothman, the Wampus Beast, and the Grafton Monster weren't just campfire tales. They were warnings. Every creature his Ames team hunted was tied to a deeper mystery hidden in the Appalachian wilderness, and trappers swore that the further they went, the stranger it got. Crew members would later say that, off-camera, Trapper kept notebooks filled with sketches, coordinates, and coded notes. He believed the creatures they were finding weren't random. They were connected through something ancient. On one page, he scrawled the words, "The signs are older than the people." Those words would haunt his team long after he was gone. By the time the cameras rolled into their third season, fans saw a leader, but those who worked beside him saw a man burdened by what he'd uncovered. He began telling producers that something didn't feel right, that their expeditions were being guided, not by curiosity, but by something that wanted them out there. He'd later confide in his closest friends that there were things in those woods even he couldn't explain, and that some truths weren't meant for television. To the world, the Appalachian investigators of mysterious sightings, or AIMS, looked like a tight-knit band of hunters chasing legends. But behind the scenes, Trapper's team was operating more like a unit than a TV cast. Buck, Huckleberry, Jeff, Willie, and Wild Bill weren't just country boys with cameras. They were trained in tracking, mapping, and night operations. Each had a job, from navigation to trap construction. And under Trapper's command, they functioned with precision. But what the audience didn't see was the fear creeping in behind their laughter. From the beginning, Trapper kept strict rules on every hunt. Never split up, always keep a clear escape path, and never ever speak the creature's name aloud in the woods. Those rules weren't just for show. They came from years of strange encounters that Trapper refused to discuss publicly. He often said that the things they were hunting weren't animals, they were guardians. In private, the team admitted they felt watched during almost every shoot. Jeff, their tech expert, once told a local radio station that his motion sensors and cameras picked up movement long before the crew arrived, as if something was waiting. As mountain monsters grew in popularity, Trapper's concern grew with it. Producers wanted more danger, more confrontation, and more spectacle. But every time the team pushed deeper into the woods, the phenomena got worse. Voices echoing from tree lines, rocks being thrown from impossible angles, and once, an entire camera battery drained the instant Trapper mentioned a creature's name. He began warning the crew, "We're getting too close to something we don't understand." His tone shifted from curiosity to unease. He wasn't chasing monsters anymore. He was chasing answers to questions that terrified him. And when one unexplained encounter left a crew member shaken enough to quit, Trapper confided quietly to the others, "This isn't folklore. It's something else, and it doesn't want to stay hidden anymore." In late 2016, the Mountain Monsters crew began filming what was supposed to be a routine investigation deep in the Tigard Valley. It was a fog-heavy week, and Trapper had become obsessed with a specific area that wasn't even on their filming schedule. He said he'd found something in old county record, a cluster of abandoned mining tunnels that didn't appear on any modern maps. The team wasn't sure what he was looking for, but Trapper was convinced that one of their creature cases, the smoke wolf, originated there. He claimed it wasn't a single beast at all, but a manifestation of something older, something summoned. The Ames crew reluctantly followed, setting up cameras near the collapsed mine entrance. The air inside was thick, stale, and carried a strange metallic odor. Trapper and Buck went in first with night vision, while the others waited outside monitoring audio. Only a few minutes in, the crew radioed that their feed was flickering and audio was cutting out. Then came a series of sharp, rhythmic bangs echoing from inside the mine, like someone was knocking on steel. When Trapper emerged, his face was pale. He said there was something down there. Not human, not animal. He refused to describe what he saw, but ordered everyone to shut down the shoot immediately. Later that night, around the campfire, he made the team swear not to tell the producers exactly what had happened. Jeff, their tech guy, tried to review the footage from the GoPro mounted on Trapper's vest, but the file was completely corrupted. Static, white noise, and a strange low hum that caused the laptop to overheat. That episode was quietly immediately shelved. The network never aired it, never even listed it in the archives. But according to Buck, Trapper kept a copy of the damaged footage on an encrypted drive. He told him, "If anything ever happens to me, you'll know where to look." That was the night Trapper stopped calling their hunts adventure. From that point on, he called them investigations into what shouldn't exist. After the Tigard Valley expedition, something about Trapper changed. Visibly, he wasn't the same man fans remembered cracking jokes or shouting orders with that familiar spark. The rest of the Ames crew noticed it too. His voice grew quieter, his planning more cautious, and his nights longer. He'd sit by the fire with a small notebook, writing furiously under the light of a headlamp, muttering to himself about patterns in the dark. Buck once asked what he was doing, and Trapper said, "It's all connected, Buck. The creatures, the tunnels, even the lights in the sky. Someone or something built this map a long time ago, and we've been walking straight into it." Weeks after that cursed shoot, the network requested all raw footage to prepare for editing. But one of the hard drives was missing. It contained the main body cams, thermal imaging, and the GoPro Trapper wore inside the mine. The network assumed it had been misplaced or damaged, but Jeff later confessed that Trapper himself had locked it away in his cabin, refusing to let anyone see it. "There are things people aren't ready to see," he reportedly said. "And if this gets out, it won't just ruin the show, it'll ruin lives." The Ames team decided to move on, filming other episodes in safer, more familiar regions. But the events in Tigard Valley followed them. Their radio frequencies would sometimes pick up distorted voices when no one was transmitting. Drones lost control mid-flight, and more than once, Jeff's motion sensors triggered at impossible angles, capturing humanoid heat signatures suspended above the tree line. Then came the night that fans still whisper about, the night the woods went silent. During a later investigation in Braxton County, West Virginia, the team experienced what they described as a total sound blackout. Every frog, cricket, and bird in the area stopped making noise all at once. The temperature dropped nearly 15 degrees in seconds. Willie remembered the firelight dimming unnaturally, as if something massive had moved between them and the flames. For nearly an hour, they stayed frozen in place, hearing only a low vibration that made their chest cavities buzz. Cameras caught nothing but faint distortion, and then, as quickly as it started, the forest came back to life. When the footage was reviewed days later, producers found something chilling. 3 frames of video showing a massive silhouette standing behind Trapper, nearly 8 feet tall, with a faint light radiating from its outline. The frames were dismissed as glitches, and the episode was edited heavily before broadcast. But the uncut version, kept by Jeff, revealed something the public never saw: a clear voice captured on the audio saying Trapper's name. After that night, he reportedly told the crew, "We're not hunting monsters anymore. We're trespassing." From that moment forward, Trapper seemed to believe someone, or something, was watching them. And the next season of Mountain Monsters would take an even darker turn, one that blurred the line between reality and something the human mind was never meant to comprehend. By 2018, Mountain Monsters had become one of the most popular paranormal shows on cable TV. But behind the cameras, the Ames team wasn't celebrating. Trapper's health was beginning to fail, and while the network wanted more big creature hunts and dramatic chases, the old tracker's focus had shifted entirely. He no longer wanted to entertain, he wanted to warn. During those final months of filming, he confided more and more in Buck and Jeff. He told them that something had changed in the woods since they started airing the show. "The mountains remember," he said quietly one night. "When you shine a light on what's meant to stay dark, something always shines back." The crew didn't know how to take that. They'd spent years chasing folklore, but Trapper's tone carried the weight of someone who had seen too much. After one shoot, Buck followed Trapper back to his cabin in Greenbrier County. Inside, the walls were covered in topographical maps of West Virginia, Kentucky, and Ohio, each pinned with strings, photographs, and strange symbols drawn in red marker. Some matched carvings the team had found on rocks during past hunts. Others looked like ancient sigils. At the center of it all, circled 3 times, was the word doorway. That's when Trapper revealed he'd been keeping a private journal for years, not about the episodes, but about what wasn't allowed to air. He called it the Appalachian Codex. Inside were accounts of strange electromagnetic pulses that preceded sightings, mutilated animal remains that vanished before authorities arrived, and even unmarked helicopters circling their filming zones the day after certain investigations. Buck later said that Trapper looked terrified when he spoke about the mine from Tigard Valley, the one that started it all. He claimed that every time he closed his eyes, he could still hear the metallic banging echoing in his head. But what chilled Buck most wasn't the fear in Trapper's eyes. It was the conviction. Trapper truly believed they had uncovered something ancient and powerful that predated human settlement in Appalachia. In one of his final recordings, found after his passing, Trapper's voice cracked as he spoke into an old camcorder. They'll say it's folklore. They'll say it's edited for TV. But there's something under those hills that doesn't belong to us. Never did. And if this show keeps digging, they'll come looking for who started it. After Trapper's death in 2019, his family found the codex hidden beneath the floorboards of his cabin. Pages were missing. Others had been burned around the edges, as if someone had tried to destroy them but stopped at the last minute. The surviving notes mentioned a pattern in 7 valleys and the name that cannot be spoken. The surviving Ames members refused to speak publicly about what was in the journal, but months later, fans began noticing subtle changes in their interviews. Less talk about monsters, more talk about forces. When asked if they'd ever found the truth Trapper was looking for, Buck's voice trembled as he said, "He found it, but it's not something we should have found at all." Whatever John Trapper Tice uncovered before he died, it wasn't a creature. It was a secret, one that even in death he seemed desperate to keep from ever reaching the light. After Trapper's passing, the Ames team struggled to continue without their leader. The showrunners wanted to honor his memory by dedicating new episodes to his legacy. But behind the scenes, Buck, Huckleberry, and Jeff were wrestling with something far darker than grief. The contents of a small black hard drive they found sealed inside Trapper's old gun safe. Written on the tape in red marker were 3 words: "Do not open yet." For days, Buck avoided it, but curiosity finally won out. One night, alone in his garage, he plugged the drive into his laptop. The screen flickered before displaying corrupted thumbnails, video files with distorted names, timestamps from the night of the Tigard Valley shoot. Buck clicked one. At first, nothing but static. Then, faintly, the image of Trapper appeared, his face illuminated by a single flashlight beam. His voice was hushed and trembling. "If you're seeing this," he said, "then I didn't make it to tell you in person. Don't go back to the mine. Don't dig deeper. You'll wake it up again." The footage cut to shaky night vision, brief glimpses of symbols carved into the tunnel walls, shapes that looked burned rather than etched. The final clip showed what appeared to be a shadow moving against the light source, crawling along the walls and ceiling with unnatural speed. Then, a burst of white noise and silence. Buck unplugged the drive and threw it into a drawer, but the damage was done. Within days, members of the crew reported strange malfunctions with their phones and cameras, like an unseen signal was interfering. Producers from the network demanded the footage, but Buck refused to hand it over. Shortly after, an anonymous email arrived in the production office reading, "The Tigard files are property of the U.S. Department of Forestry Research. Do not release." Jeff believed the email was fake, until 2 men in unmarked vehicles appeared outside his home days later, claiming to be consultants. They asked about the hard drive and about what John Tice may have recorded without clearance. The men left without incident, but the warning was clear. Whatever Trapper captured that night wasn't meant to be seen. That was when the Ames team realized Mountain Monsters wasn't just a show anymore. It was evidence, and someone powerful wanted that evidence buried forever. In early 2020, several months after Trapper's passing, the Ames crew quietly regrouped to shoot what was supposed to be a tribute episode. It was meant to honor his life, revisiting old locations, sharing stories, and reflecting on the years spent together under his leadership. But what happened that night never aired on television, and to this day, only fragments of the story have leaked through whispers from the crew. They chose a secluded area in the heart of Greenbrier County, not far from Trapper's cabin. According to Jeff, the team wanted to perform a simple campfire memorial near one of the spots Trapper had marked on his map, a location labeled only as the Gateway. They brought minimal equipment, just a few cameras, and planned to spend one night. But the moment they arrived, things felt off. The woods were unnaturally quiet, and the air had that same metallic taste Trapper once described after the Tygart Valley encounter. As the fire crackled and the team shared memories, Jeff's EMF meter began to spike. He assumed it was faulty equipment until every electronic device on site, from cameras to flashlights, suddenly shut off. A complete blackout. They sat in pitch darkness for nearly 30 seconds until Buck's lantern flickered back to life, revealing something that made his stomach drop. The trees surrounding the clearing were marked with the same symbols Trapper had drawn in his journal. Then came the sound, a low, distorted hum that seemed to rise from the ground itself. It wasn't wind. It wasn't an animal. The noise vibrated in their chests, a deep resonance that made their vision blur. And within that hum, Jeff swore he heard a whisper, one that said Trapper's name. The next morning, the crew left in silence. None of the cameras had recorded a thing, even though they had been rolling before the blackout. Every SD card had been wiped clean. The data, unrecoverable. That episode, meant to celebrate Trapper's life, was never released. And according to Buck, it wasn't because of technical failure. It's like something didn't want that night remembered, he said later. Like it took the memory right out of the air. That was the last time the Ames team filmed in that part of West Virginia. And for some of them, it was the night they truly began to believe Trapper hadn't been chasing monsters. He'd been warning them. Not long after the blackout incident, whispers began spreading among crew members that the network itself was under pressure to end mountain monsters quietly. Several editors who had worked on the series were suddenly reassigned, and key footage from the last season mysteriously vanished from the studio server. One technician later admitted that he was ordered to delete all clips related to the Tygart mine and Trapper's final messages. The official reason? Archival consolidation. But insiders claimed it was far more sinister. Buck received an unmarked package at his home around this time. A burned CD containing a single audio file. When he played it, all he could hear was static, until a faint voice emerged beneath the noise. It was unmistakably Trapper's, whispering, "Don't let them close the door." Within a week, the channel announced an indefinite hiatus for the show. Publicly, they said it was due to production restructuring. Privately, those who knew Trapper's warnings understood exactly what had happened. The monsters weren't the threat anymore. The truth was, in the years since his passing, fans still mourn John Trapper Tice as a legend of Appalachian folklore. But for those who worked beside him, the weight of his final secret still lingers. Buck has refused interviews. Huckleberry rarely speaks publicly. Yet at conventions, when the subject of Trapper's lost investigation comes up, there's always that brief, haunted silence, like they know something the rest of us don't. Rumors persist that Trapper's hidden journal, the Appalachian Codex, contained coordinates, 7 in total, forming a pattern across West Virginia's coal belt. Some claim those points mark ancient burial mounds, others entrances to something deeper. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. The man who dedicated his life to chasing monsters may have found the biggest one of all, a secret buried under the mountains themselves, guarded by something that never wanted to be found. And maybe, just maybe, it still watches from the trees. For years, mountain monsters thrilled viewers with folklore, fear, and friendship, a group of rugged hunters chasing legends through the heart of Appalachia. But behind the laughter and brotherhood, one of them carried a secret the cameras never showed. Joe Huckleberry Lott, the protector of the AIMS team, has finally spoken out about a season the network erased, a mission so disturbing it was locked away and never broadcast. What did they really find deep in those West Virginia woods? Why did producers order it buried? Make sure you're subscribed, because what Huckleberry revealed was never meant to reach the public. Joe Huckleberry Lott was the backbone of Mountain Monsters. While the rest of the AIMS crew brought the chaos and the humor, Huckleberry brought calm, strength, and a quiet sense of control. To fans, he was the man who never lost his cool, even when the woods came alive with roars and shadows. But those those who worked beside him knew there was more to him than what the cameras showed. He wasn't just the team's enforcer, he was its protector, both physically and emotionally. When others panicked, he was the one keeping the group together. By the time the show hit its stride around 2015, Huckleberry had become the heart of the team. He and Trapper shared an unspoken bond, a trust built over decades of friendship and hunts that pushed them to their limits. He didn't crave fame or recognition. He didn't need to prove himself on camera. He was there for the hunt, the brotherhood, and the truth. But with every new expedition, the tone of mountain monsters was shifting. The hunts were getting darker, the encounters stranger, and the fear on the crew's faces less performative. Fans noticed that Huckleberry began to change too. The once light-hearted guardian grew quieter and more serious. He would often walk off camera between shots, staring into the trees like he was listening for something. On one occasion, when Buck joked about calling out the beast, Huckleberry snapped, something viewers had never seen. "You don't call it out unless you're ready for it to answer," he said flatly. The mood turned cold. Behind the scenes, Trapper and Jeff reportedly warned him to take a break, but he refused. He told them there was unfinished business in the woods, something he couldn't walk away from. What few people knew was that during the show's peak, an investigation had already been filmed that no one outside the crew would ever see. It was darker, more dangerous, and would eventually become the buried secret that haunted Huckleberry for years to come. And when the truth finally came out, it wasn't the monsters that terrified him. It was the men who tried to make that season disappear. ChatGPT said, in late 2017, the Mountain Monsters crew began filming what was supposed to be their boldest season yet. One that would take them deeper into the Appalachian wilderness than ever before. The production notes listed the location simply as Site 7, a stretch of remote forest land in southern West Virginia with no nearby towns, cell service, or paved roads. Local whispers claimed strange lights had been seen hovering over the ridge, and hunters reported finding deer carcasses stacked in unnatural patterns. It sounded like the perfect setup for another AIMS adventure, but the team had no idea what they were walking into. From the first day, things felt wrong. The weather changed unpredictably, electronics malfunctioned, and even seasoned woodsmen like Huckleberry admitted the air felt off. The first night, they heard movement beyond their camp, not the scurrying of small animals, but heavy footsteps circling the perimeter. Jeff's thermal scanner picked up a large bipedal shape, but when the team rushed to intercept, the figure was gone. The next morning, they found claw marks etched into the side of their utility trailer, 3 vertical grooves that tore straight through the metal. Over the following days, Huckleberry's demeanor began to shift. He was more alert than usual, constantly scanning the tree line, urging the others to keep their voices down. One cameraman recalled him muttering, "It's watching how we move." The others laughed it off, but Huckleberry didn't join in. He stopped sleeping, instead pacing the edges of camp until sunrise. By the end of the second week, the team had enough footage to fill multiple episodes. But when they returned from that final night's hunt, Huckleberry refused to hand over his camera. "Not this one," he told the producers. "It's not ready to be seen." Hours later, that camera was quietly taken from his bunk and sent off with the rest of the hard drives for post-production. Within days, Mountain Monsters vanished from the production schedule. Huckleberry wouldn't talk about it for years, but those who were there said the truth was simple. That night, they'd captured something the network wasn't prepared to air, and he knew it the moment it stepped into frame. The night that changed everything began like any other hunt. Long hours, freezing wind, and the kind of quiet that makes every twig snap sound like a gunshot. The AIMS team had been tracking strange movement along a ridgeline near the Tug Fork River, following prints that seemed to belong to something walking upright. Jeff's thermal scanner kept picking up flashes of heat that moved too fast to be an animal. By midnight, the team split into pairs to cover more ground. Huckleberry and Buck went north with a camera, while Wild Bill and Jeff circled south to monitor motion sensors. At 1:43 a.m., Jeff's radio crackled with a single word from Huckleberry: movement. The static that followed lasted over a minute. Then, through the interference, came what sounded like breathing, deep, rhythmic, and close to the microphone. The crew sprinted toward Huckleberry's location. When they found him, he was standing motionless in the dark, staring uphill. The camera was still rolling, but what it captured would later send chills through anyone who saw it. A faint shape stood between two trees, at least 8 feet tall, its outline shimmering as if the air itself was bending around it. It wasn't a clear figure, more like a distortion, something not fully there. As Huckleberry whispered, "It's looking at us." The figure moved, but it didn't charge or retreat. It tilted its head, the way a person studies something, and then it vanished, as if the night swallowed it whole. The team stood frozen, unable to speak. Then, all at once, every piece of equipment they carried shut down. When the cameras rebooted, the time code had jumped forward 9 minutes. No one remembered what happened during that gap. The crew's radios screamed with static, and Buck started shaking, muttering, "It was behind us." Later, when they returned to camp, they found that several of their traps had been tripped, not by animals, but by something that seemed to drag the bait out without triggering the sensors. The footage was reviewed once in the field tent, once before the producers ordered it packed and labeled "pending review." Huckleberry tried to stop them, insisting the world deserved to see what they'd caught. But the look in his eyes told another story. Whatever he saw that night, it wasn't excitement, it was fear. He later said quietly to a crew member, "That thing was thinking. It wasn't hiding, it was deciding." And that was the last night Mountain Monsters ever filmed in West Virginia's Site 7. When filming wrapped at Site 7, the team expected to head home, regroup, and begin editing as usual. Instead, they were met by silence. Discovery's production office called the next morning and told them to stay put. Within 48 hours, a separate crew arrived. Not network staff, but men in plain clothes with clipboards and unmarked cases. They said they were media auditors, but none of the AIMS members recognized them. Their first order was simple: turn over all footage, batteries, and storage drives immediately. At first, the team thought it was a legal review. Maybe the network worried about liability, but things felt off from the start. One of the men confiscated Huckleberry's personal GoPro, despite his protests that it contained only camp footage. When he refused, they threatened to remove him from the show entirely. They weren't producers, Huckleberry said later. They were there to take everything. Trapper, already struggling with health issues, tried to push back. He demanded to know why the network had brought in outsiders instead of their regular editing crew. The men gave no explanation. Instead, they packed every hard drive into padded cases, sealed them, and left without saying where they were going. By that evening, the Mountain Monsters crew had been told to suspend all filming pending corporate review. No one ever saw the footage again. The following week, every AIMS member received an updated non-disclosure agreement, far stricter than anything they'd signed before. It prohibited discussion of unaired material and field activity beyond approved production boundary. Huckleberry was furious. "They didn't want us talking about what we found," he later told a close friend. "They wanted it gone." Within days, the show's website quietly removed upcoming episode listings. The network's contact with the crew dropped to near zero. Calls went unanswered. Paychecks were delayed. Trapper reportedly told Huckleberry, "They buried it, brother." Whatever was on those tapes scared somebody. Behind closed doors, rumors spread among editors that Discovery had turned over the Site 7 footage to a private analysis firm for content evaluation. No one from the original production team was allowed to see it again. For Huckleberry, that was the breaking point. The show he'd devoted his life to had suddenly gone dark, and the evidence of what they'd encountered, his proof that they weren't just chasing legends, was gone. Years later, he'd described that moment as the first time he realized Mountain Monsters wasn't just being canceled, it was being erased. In the weeks that followed, Huckleberry couldn't shake what had happened at Site 7, or the way it had all been taken from him. He kept expecting a call from the producers, an email, anything. Nothing came. When he reached out to the editor he'd worked with for years, the man refused to talk on the phone, sending only a short message: "Don't ask about it again." At first, Huckleberry thought it was some kind of legal mess. Maybe Discovery had shelved the project for budget reasons, but then the dreams started. He'd wake up, drenched in sweat, convinced he was back in the woods, hearing that same guttural breathing. He told Yvette Fielding in a later interview that he felt like something was unfinished, like it didn't stay there. there. The rest of the AIMS crew tried to move on, but everyone felt the tension. Buck mentioned that his camera batteries would drain whenever he reviewed footage from that trip. Jeff said his computer froze every time he tried to open the backup folder from Site 7. Wild Bill joked about it on camera, but even he stopped smiling when the jokes kept turning into static-filled silence. A few months later, Huckleberry met privately with a Discovery contact who'd quietly worked on the show since its beginning. What she told him made his blood run cold. The footage from Site 7 hadn't been lost. It had been transferred to a research firm for content evaluation, the same phrase the plainclothed men had used. They said it wasn't entertainment, she told him. They said it was evidence. That was the moment Huckleberry realized the show wasn't being paused. It was being buried. He tried warning the rest of the crew, but they were already under renewed NDAs and legal silence. To outsiders, the delay looked like routine network business. To Huckleberry, it felt like a cover-up. "We showed them something real," he said later, "and real is bad for business." The incident changed him. He stopped giving interviews, stopped smiling during fan conventions. Whatever the AIMS team found that night wasn't just erased from television, it had been erased from their lives. When word finally spread that Mountain Monsters was on hiatus, the public assumed it was due to production issues or Trapper's declining health. But behind closed doors, the reality was far more chilling. After the Site 7 incident, Discovery executives grew increasingly nervous. Reports circulated internally about audio anomalies and disturbing visual content. Editors who had worked on the footage described it as wrong, not just eerie, but unnatural. One of them allegedly quit after reviewing a short clip that showed a distorted figure moving between frames, almost as if it were aware of being filmed. When played back frame by frame, the creature's head appeared to turn toward the lens. The network's lawyers intervened soon after. All hard drives were sealed, and a confidentiality directive was sent to every contractor who had handled the material. The wording was unusual. Phrases like potential legal risk and biological misidentification appeared in documents that had nothing to do with entertainment. That's when the whispers began that Discovery wasn't just afraid of ridicule. They were afraid of what the footage might reveal. Meanwhile, Huckleberry refused to let it go. He contacted an editor he trusted and asked for any copy of the raw recordings, even a corrupted version. A week later, he received a cryptic message. They're not supposed to exist anymore. Soon after, his calls stopped going through. According to crew members, he started keeping notes of everything: dates, locations, the names of those who had confiscated the drives. He believed the footage had been sent to a private facility under the guise of forensic evaluation. By summer 2018, Discovery pulled Mountain Monsters from its lineup completely. The official reason was creative restructuring. But insiders knew better. The Site 7 tapes had triggered something corporate couldn't control or explain. Huckleberry described the decision as a panic move, a way to erase a problem before it grew. "They weren't afraid of us faking something," he later told a friend. "They were afraid we caught something real." For the first time in the show's history, AIMS wasn't hunting monsters. The network was hunting their evidence. And in that battle, Huckleberry was the only one still fighting back. The fallout from the Site 7 incident tore through the AIMS crew like a slow-moving storm. By early 2019, their unity, the brotherhood that had carried them through years of hunts, was fracturing under the pressure. Buck became withdrawn, rarely returning calls. Jeff buried himself in research, scouring old Appalachian folklore for anything that resembled what they'd seen. Wild Bill tried to keep morale up with humor, but even his laughter sounded forced. Huckleberry, once their steady center, had become consumed by what the network had taken from them. "They killed the show to protect themselves," he told a close friend. "But it's not the show that needs protecting, it's us." His obsession with uncovering the truth grew worse. He started meeting privately with small-town locals who claimed to have seen the same shimmering figure near the mountains where Site 7 had been filmed. Some of their stories were eerily similar: bright distortions in the trees, machinery shutting down, missing time. Huckleberry began to wonder whether the creature they'd filmed wasn't just in that one location, but following them. He once told Buck, "We didn't leave it in the woods, man. It left with us." The others wanted to move on, maybe even revive Mountain Monsters under a new banner, but Huckleberry refused. Until they release that footage, he said, everything else is just noise. That determination, bordering on obsession, alienated him from the crew. What had started as a brotherhood built on trust had turned into quiet suspicion. They were afraid to talk, afraid to be seen as disloyal, afraid of who might still be listening. Not long after, Discovery's lawyers reached out again, this time warning that any future mention of Site 7 or the unreleased season would result in immediate legal action. That sealed the division. The others walked away, choosing silence over risk. Huckleberry, though, couldn't let it rest. He told friends he was being followed, that unmarked trucks sometimes idled outside his home. Whether paranoia or truth, no one could say. But everyone noticed he was no longer sleeping well. By that point, Mountain Monsters was officially dead. But the story of what happened at Site 7 was far from over. For Huckleberry, it wasn't a canceled season anymore. It was a cover-up, and he was the only one still brave or reckless enough to dig into it. By early 2020, the story of Mountain Monsters had gone completely silent. No updates, no interviews, no official statements. But that changed when a small paranormal podcast called Hollow Earth Frequency announced a surprise guest, Joe Huckleberry Lott. Fans expected jokes and nostalgia. What they got instead was something closer to a confession. He sounded tired, his usual steady drawl replaced with hesitation. They told us never to talk about that season, he said. But if I'm being honest, what we found out there, it wasn't just some animal. The hosts pressed him for details, but Huckleberry refused to name the location or describe the creature directly. Let's just say it wasn't supposed to move the way it did, he said. It was thinking. Watching his tone shifted when one host laughed nervously. You think I'm kidding? He said quietly. It was like it knew what we were gonna do before we did it. The podcast went viral overnight, but within 48 hours, the episode was deleted across all platforms. The show's hosts later claimed they were hit with a legal takedown from Discovery's attorneys, citing breach of confidentiality. Huckleberry didn't return for a second interview, and fans who tried contacting him online found his social media pages suddenly inactive. A few weeks later, however, an anonymous Reddit user claiming to be part of the Mountain Monsters production team posted that a hard drive had gone missing from Discovery's archives years earlier. The post described a 90-minute rough cut labeled S7E01, unclassified footage, showing Huckleberry staring into a camera and saying, "This shouldn't be on TV." The post was removed within hours. When Huckleberry was later asked in person if the footage existed, he gave a chilling answer. If you've seen it, you know why they buried it. Then he smiled faintly and added, "Some things, once you see them, they don't let you go." That was the last public statement Joe Huckleberry Lott ever made about Mountain Monsters. From then on, every time someone asked about the missing season, he just said the same 6 words. Today, Joe Huckleberry Lott rarely talks about Mountain Monsters at all. He still appears at conventions from time to time, still smiles for fans, but the spark that once defined him seems dimmed. When asked about Site 7, he politely changes the subject. Those closest to him say he's never been the same since that final, unaired season. He keeps a small leather notebook everywhere he goes, the same one he used to jot coordinates during hunts. But now it's filled with names, weather patterns, and strange symbols he refuses to explain. In the years since the podcast incident, more fragments of the mystery have leaked out. A few seconds of lost footage occasionally surface online. Usually grainy clips showing Huckleberry standing in fog, whispering, "It's still here." Each time, the clips vanish almost as quickly as they appear. Discovery denies every leak. Still, fans remain convinced the buried season exists somewhere, hidden in an archive or locked in a private collection. Some even claim to have found coordinates etched faintly in one episode's closing credits that lead deep into the Appalachian wilderness. For Huckleberry, though, the chase is over. In a rare 2024 appearance, he was asked if he'd ever return to the mountains to finish what they started. He smiled sadly and said, "We already finished it. We just didn't win." Then, after a long pause, he added, "Whatever's up there, it's still watching." And that's where the story ends. Not with a finale, not with closure, but with a warning. The lost season of Mountain Monsters isn't just a rumor or a legend. It's a scar on the men who lived it. Because according to Huckleberry, the real monster was never the creature they hunted. It was the silence that followed when they found it. Between 2018 and 2020, Mountain Monsters vanished without warning. No new episodes, no statements, no answers. For nearly 2 years, fans were left in silence, and the rumors grew darker with each passing month. Some said the network pulled funding. Others believed something happened deep in the Appalachian woods that no one was allowed to talk about. Now, whispers from inside the AIMS team are surfacing, and what they suggest is far more disturbing than any creature hunt. Make sure you're subscribed, because the truth about the lost season was never meant to reach the public. When Mountain Monsters aired its 5th season in early 2018, the AIMS team seemed unstoppable. Trapper, Buck, Huckleberry, Jeff, Willie, and Wild Bill were local legends by then. 6 Appalachian hunters chasing the unknown across miles of untamed wilderness. Fans tuned in, expecting another round of monster hunts, laughter, and campfire storytelling. But after the finale aired, something strange happened. Nothing. No promos for a new season, no interviews, no official announcements. The show went completely dark. At first, viewers assumed it was a normal production break, but months turned into a year, and then another. Emails to the network went unanswered. Cast appearances were canceled. Even reruns were quietly removed from schedules. It was as if Mountain Monsters had never existed. Then came the first whisper. A crew member's relative posting online that something had happened on the final expedition of 2018. She didn't say what, only that the men came back different. Local residents near Pendleton County, West Virginia, where the team had filmed their last hunt, began reporting unusual activity around the time of the show's disappearance. Strange lights in the trees, gunshots echoing at odd hours, and groups of men shouting deep in the forest long after midnight. The accounts matched the period the AIMS team was known to be on location. Theories spread like wildfire. Some claimed the network pulled the plug due to budget issues. Others insisted the cast refused to continue after a night that went wrong. The more people dug, the stranger it got. The final episode had ended on a cliffhanger. Trapper claiming the team was close to finding a creature called Spearfinger. But the search for Spearfinger was never concluded. The following spring, Discovery executives refused to comment on the show's future. Fans were left in total silence. No renewal, no cancellation, just an unexplained void. A 2-year blackout in which not one member of the AIMS team said a word about what happened. And for the first time since Mountain Monsters began, the hunters who'd always chased danger seemed to be hiding from it. The final confirmed shoot of Mountain Monsters took place in late 2018, somewhere in the highlands of southern West Virginia. Internally, the AIMS crew referred to the area as the Nest, a stretch of remote forest so dense that even GPS signals flickered in and out. Locals had been reporting something unusual for months. Howls that didn't match any known animal, trees split down the middle as if struck from within, and eerie mimicry, voices echoing through the night that sounded human but weren't. "It's not just watching," Trapper said in a behind-the-scenes interview that never aired. "It's talking back." That expedition was meant to close out the season, a dramatic all-night hunt to capture evidence of what witnesses called the Dark Thing. According to production notes recovered later, the crew began setup at 4 p.m. and launched thermal drones by 8 p.m. But around 10:47 p.m., the logs started showing strange activity. All 3 GPS trackers began shifting locations on their own, showing the team miles from where they actually stood. At 2:17 a.m., Jeff's radio crackled with static, followed by his panicked voice. 2 sets of eyes, red, watching the ridge. Then Then, silence. It took the rest of the crew 40 minutes to locate him. When they did, Jeff was sitting in the dark beside a creek, his equipment scattered. His GPS had factory reset, erasing all coordinates. His data drives were blank. When asked what happened, he could barely speak. "It got close," he muttered. "It was right there." The rest of the night was a blur. They regrouped at camp before sunrise, packed up, and drove off the mountain without filming another scene. Production officially ended the following week. The raw footage from that night was sent to Discovery's vaults and never seen again. Later, Buck described that night in one line that sent chills through fans. "We were hunting something until it started hunting us." What happened after that night was never supposed to reach the public, but fragments have leaked from crew members who couldn't forget what they saw. According to one internal production memo, the final shoot ran several hours longer than scheduled because Huckleberry went missing. Around 3:30 a.m., his radio fell silent while tracking movement near the ridge. At first, the team assumed his battery had died, but when they triangulated his last known position, the signal kept bouncing, shifting several hundred feet every minute, as if he were moving too fast for anyone to follow. When they finally found him, nearly 5 hours later, he was standing alone in the fog, staring toward the tree line. His flashlight was still on, but dim, and his eyes looked glassy, unfocused. "He didn't even know we were there," Buck later said. "We called his name 3 times before he blinked." Huckleberry wouldn't explain what happened, only repeating, "I followed it too far." His GPS unit was dead, its internal clock reset to 00. Even the backup memory card inside was wiped clean. That was the turning point. Trapper ordered all equipment shut down. "We're pulling out," he said, according to an assistant camera operator. "Whatever's in these woods, it don't want to be filmed." Jeff smashed 2 trail cameras before leaving, muttering that he wasn't bringing that thing home. When they returned to the staging area, none of the footage from Huckleberry's camera would play. Each file ended in the same way, with a flash of static, followed by what one editor later described as a sound like breathing, but inside the mic. The following day, the AIMS team packed their gear and drove off without saying a word. They didn't even film a wrap-up segment, a first in the show's history. That missing footage, according to insiders, was quietly locked away and labeled unusable, and that was the last anyone saw of mountain monsters for almost 2 years. After the 2018 expedition abruptly ended, mountain monsters didn't just take a break, it vanished. No finale aired, no press statement followed, and not a single cast member addressed the fan. For months, the Destination America network, which had recently merged into Discovery, ignored every inquiry about the show's future. It wasn't an ordinary hiatus, it was a blackout, and inside sources say that the decision to bury mountain monsters came from the very top, the day after the crew returned from West Virginia. According to leaked internal memos, the footage from that final night was classified as restricted access, and only 2 senior editors were allowed to view it. Both left the project within weeks. Their exit reports mentioned audio inconsistencies, visual contamination, and one chilling line: certain elements recorded on the thermal feeds are not consistent with any known biological form. The files were pulled, encrypted, and archived under a label never used for entertainment programming before: field material, unresolved. When production staff asked when editing would resume, Discovery executives issued a gag order. No one was to speak publicly about the West Virginia shoot under any circumstances. Within 48 hours, all unedited hard drives were collected by security contractors and flown to a private facility in Maryland. Crew members were told it was standard legal protocol, but no one had ever seen that level of caution for a reality show. "They treated it like classified footage," said one assistant editor, "like they'd stumbled onto something they didn't want the world to see." Meanwhile, the cast began to withdraw from public life. Jeff and Willie cut off contact entirely, while Buck and Huckleberry declined every interview. At local events, when fans asked about the show's status, they simply said, "We can't talk about it." One cameraman later admitted that, even off the record, the crew wouldn't discuss the footage. "It scared them," he said, "and not much scares those guys." Fans soon noticed something else. Mountain Monsters reruns were quietly disappearing from streaming services. Even older episodes that had aired for years were suddenly missing entire segments. Searches on the network's site redirected to unrelated titles. When journalists reached out for comment, Discovery's public relations team replied with a cryptic statement. The AIMS team is taking a temporary hiatus due to production reevaluation. But behind closed doors, staff heard a different version. According to one anonymous network employee, Mountain Monsters wasn't canceled, it was quarantined. The footage wasn't unusable, the employee said. It was too real. Months later, one of the senior editors who had viewed the restricted material reportedly told a friend, "If the public ever saw what was on those cameras, no one would set foot in those woods again." That's when the silence began to make sense. Whatever the AIMS team encountered that night, it didn't just end the season, it ended something much bigger. The network wasn't protecting its brand anymore, it was protecting people. The deeper insiders dug into the data from that final shoot, the stranger the technical anomalies became. Normally, a Mountain Monsters expedition would log dozens of readings, GPS routes, thermal footage, radio chatter, and hours of night vision video. But the West Virginia files were unlike anything the production team had ever seen. The metadata didn't add up, timestamps jumped backward, coordinates overlapped, and in several cases, the instruments appeared to record locations that didn't exist, places outside known topography. According to one internal report, all 3 GPS systems had glitched at once, displaying coordinates over 200 miles away, deep in Virginia. They were triangulating something that wasn't there, said a field tech who reviewed the logs. Drones deployed above the ridge dropped out of the sky seconds later, as if their navigation systems had been scrambled by an electromagnetic pulse. Even the main generator, a rugged industrial-grade unit meant to run non-stop for days, shut down without warning. When it came back online, its onboard clock had reset to 12 a.m. Then came the audio files. The sound engineer, a veteran of dozens of field shoots, said he'd never seen anything like it. The mics picked up this low hum, rhythmic, too steady to be natural, he explained later. It sounded almost like breathing through a machine. The tone was faint, below human hearing range, but powerful enough to distort nearby frequencies. When he tried to play it back at the studio, the entire workstation froze. That portion of the recording has never been recovered. The thermal readings were even more disturbing. On one of the handheld units, an enormous heat signature appeared for less than 3 seconds, 9 feet tall, bipedal, and radiating far above body temperature. The operator swore it moved between trees faster than any human could sprint, but when the data transferred to a backup drive, the image was gone. Not corrupted, deleted. Someone or something had overwritten it. Even stranger, the motion sensors set along the perimeter recorded multiple moving entities circling the crew's location. They weren't random, said one analyst who later studied the patterns. It's like they were moving tactically, flanking. When the field team returned from the mountains, their equipment was in shambles. Cameras refused to power on. Memory cards were blank. One of the crew's laptops wouldn't boot at all, showing only a black screen with white static. After the shutdown, one technician quietly copied what little remained of the thermal scans to a personal drive, a breach of protocol that later got him fired. Before leaving, he told a colleague, "You can't delete what we saw, you can only hide it." The surviving fragments of that data have never resurfaced publicly, but the rumors persist. Those who viewed it described it the same way: distorted sounds, glitched coordinates, and a faint figure watching from the tree line. Whatever happened that night didn't just crash their equipment, it rewrote it. And for the AIMS team, that was the moment when Mountain Monsters stopped being television and became something else entirely. When the AIMS team came down from the mountains that morning, they didn't just look exhausted, they looked broken. What had started as another night chasing folklore had ended in something that left even the toughest among them shaken to their core. Discovery offered counseling and debriefing sessions, but only a few attended. The rest vanished into their own corners of Appalachia, trying to forget. It wasn't just fear, one producer later said. It was like they'd all brought something back with them. Jeff was the first to change. Normally upbeat and analytical, he began refusing to enter wooded areas, even during the day. His wife reportedly found him sitting on their porch one night, staring into the forest for hours, muttering, "It's still out there." He claimed he could hear the same faint hum they'd recorded on the lost footage, like a heartbeat pulsing through the trees. Willie, the team's trap builder, started hearing whispers whenever he worked alone in his shop. At first, he thought it was just exhaustion, but he swore the voices were calling his name, slow, drawn out, almost mocking. He dismantled his entire workshop a few months later. "I'm done building things to catch monsters," he told a friend. "It feels like I already did." Huckleberry, who had gone missing that night, suffered the worst. Friends said he was jumpy, paranoid, and avoided eye contact. He stopped sleeping in his house and spent nights on his porch with a shotgun across his lap. When asked what happened in the woods, he would only say, "It followed me back." Even Buck, the heart of the team, seemed changed. During one failed attempt to resume filming, he told a producer, "You can't chase shadows when you already live in one." He'd always been the one to push the crew forward, but after the lost season, he was the one asking to go home. The most unsettling of all came from Trapper, the team's leader. Already struggling with illness, he refused interviews entirely and warned the others to stay silent. "You think the monsters are the danger," he told them, "but it's what comes after that's worse." For nearly 2 years, none of them spoke publicly. They turned down every media appearance, ignored fan questions, and stopped attending conventions. Those who knew them best said it wasn't just NDA pressure, it was trauma. "They weren't the same men," said a camera operator. "They went into those woods looking for answers and came back afraid of the question." By the end of 2019, the AIMS team wasn't just on hiatus. It was fractured. They'd built their lives on tracking what others feared, but whatever they encountered in those mountains didn't want to be found, and it made sure they never went looking again. Rumors about the lost mountain monsters footage began spreading in late 2019, when an anonymous post appeared on a Cryptid research forum claiming to have seen something the network buried. The user described a short, uncut thermal clip from the team's final night, and what it showed wasn't a blurry outline or shadow. It was a figure, 9 feet tall, upright, standing perfectly still at the edge of the frame, its heat signature pulsing like it was breathing. The poster said it wasn't running or hiding, it was waiting. Within hours, the thread vanished, deleted by moderators who later claimed they'd been contacted by Discovery's legal team, but screenshots spread anyway. The still image showed glowing amber eyes and a long, angular frame that didn't match any known primate. One editor who'd worked on the show confirmed privately that the leaked image looked nearly identical to what he'd seen before quitting the project. "It wasn't Bigfoot," he said. "Whatever that thing was, it looked thinner, almost human, but wrong." The footage, according to insiders, had been smuggled out by a camera operator who refused to let the evidence die. He allegedly copied it to a personal drive before Discovery's security team seized the rest. When questioned, he denied everything, but co-workers recalled him saying, "Some truths don't belong to corporations." That copy has never surfaced again, but its existence continues to haunt fans and former staff alike. One network technician later admitted the original files had been purged from every server. "You don't erase footage because it's boring," he said. "You erase it because it's real." From that point on, anyone who mentioned the lost season risked termination. Editors were reassigned, and all internal archives referencing the 2018 expedition were labeled unverified assets. Whatever the AIMS team captured that night, it wasn't a myth. It was evidence someone decided the world should never see. When Mountain Monsters finally returned in early 2021, fans were relieved, but longtime viewers could feel something was off immediately. The show looked familiar on the surface. Same music, same format, same wild hunts through the Appalachian night. But underneath the laughter and banter, there was a heaviness that hadn't been there before. The energy was gone. The AIMS team wasn't chasing legends anymore. They were avoiding them. For the first time, the series never mentioned the events of 2018 or the missing 2 years. It was as if that entire chapter had been erased. The hunts were shorter, the tone lighter, and the show never returned to the same West Virginia location. When fans asked why, Buck gave a cryptic answer during a convention appearance: "We don't go back there. The woods don't forget." That single line reignited all the old theories that something in those mountains had driven them away. Even on camera, the team seemed changed. Jeff stayed quiet, rarely handling tech equipment. Willie kept to building traps, but avoided working alone. Huckleberry, once the group's fearless enforcer, looked distracted, always scanning the tree line like he was expecting something to step out. And Trapper, whose health was failing, refused to address what had happened. In one behind-the-scenes moment that never aired publicly, he reportedly said, "We found what we were looking for. That's why we stopped." Off-screen, things were stranger still. Crew members said production rules had changed. No night shoots without multiple generators, no more isolated camps, and all recordings were sent directly to Discovery's new encrypted server. "It wasn't about quality control," said one cameraman. "It was about control, period." Viewers who paid attention noticed the small cracks, missing timestamps, cut dialogue, and references to that night, quickly edited out. Something had left its mark on Mountain Monsters, and even though the show came back, the spirit of the hunt didn't. Whatever the AIMS team encountered in those lost woods, it followed them home, and the return of the series felt less like a comeback and more like a warning. To this day, no one knows what really happened during Mountain Monsters' lost season. The AIMS team never spoke about it, and Discovery buried every trace. Trapper took the truth to his grave, and the others changed forever. Locals still whisper about a section of forest where GPS fails, and voices echo through the trees. Some say the lost footage still exists, hidden away. When asked what it showed, one former producer said only, "They weren't alone. Whatever the team found in those mountains, it ended the hunt and left the woods watching ever since."